Welcome back to the JavaScript Essential Training Series. I am Mike King, your host. And in this tutorial, we'll be wrapping up our tutorials on arrays. This is arrays part 3 in JavaScript. And again, like part 2, I'm going to just jump right into our development environment because there's some more things I want to show you about arrays and things that we can do with arrays inside JavaScript. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drop back down into our development environment. Let me minimize our presentation. Get back in the development environment. Obviously, we've already got our Apache server up and running. I've got Sublime Text 3 up and loaded. And I'm actually looking at the file that we ended with our last tutorial on. I'm going to do a save as. I am going to save this as array_2.html. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove all the code except for our array structure. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all those paragraphs. I'm going to remove all this code except the array structure itself. I still want to work with that array. This way we don't have to create a new one. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this 4 down onto its own line because that's normally how they would be displayed, by the way. For people that actually like to build the arrays with the constructor function, they actually put them this way so it's easy to see what's exactly in there and how they've set them up. All right, so the first thing I want to do, let's go ahead and update our title. This is arrays in JavaScript part 3. Let's go ahead and save those changes. And then I want to go into my browser and actually load up arrays_2.html. All we should have now is that title. So in our first example, what I want to do is I want to demonstrate the ability to convert an array to strings, because we actually have a built-in function inside JavaScript that allows me to take arrays and convert them to strings. Now, granted, these are strings to begin with, so you're not going to see a lot of difference here, but I just want you to know that that built-in element is there. And what we can do, we can actually do that by creating our cars array inside this particular method. And again, it's a JavaScript method called toString. It converts an array to a string of comma-separated array values. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my exercise file. I'm going to come right down below where we have our array. I'm going to paste this in place, document.getElementById. And again, I'm referring to the cars array in our HTML, and I'm going to go ahead and populate our paragraph just like we've been doing in the previous examples. But you'll notice this time I got cars.toString, and then in parentheses, I actually have the in parentheses blank, but it's going to convert that cars array to string values separated by commas. If I go ahead and save this, refresh my browser window, you'll see now that we've got all those values inside of our array converted into a string element, and they're separated by commas. We also have what's called the join method, because this also joins arrays elements into strings. The neat thing with the join method is we can actually have them separated by whatever character we decide to put in there. And let me show you what I mean, because it behaves very similar to the string method, but we can actually assign the character instead of a comma. We can actually use whatever we want. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my text document so you don't have to watch me type it. I'm going to come down right below where we had this one, and this is actually going to do the join method. So I'm going to create a variable called join values, or join val. That's going to be equal to cars.join. Then in quotation marks, I've got my star symbol. That's what I actually want to separate them by. So we're actually going to take all the values inside the array, and we're going to separate them with my star symbol. And then what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and write that to the screen. So I'm going to come right below that. I'm going to use a standard document.write that we've been using for many of our examples. Document.write, put in my break tag, and then concatenate the join value to that break tag. So it'll give me a line feed after the after my last demonstration. Let's go ahead and save those. Good time to pause if you want to type it in. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up a little bit, refresh my browser window, and now you'll see we've actually taken the values of the array and we've actually separated them based on the star character that we put in the join method inside of JavaScript. Very cool, very interesting way of actually listing out the values of our array. So as we discussed in one of our earlier tutorials, array elements are accessed using their index number inside JavaScript. Array indexes start with 0. 0 is the first array element. We talked about that. 1 is the second, 2 is the third, and so on and so forth. So what if I wanted to go ahead and create an array, but I wanted to replace one of those indexes? Let me show you how we can do that. I'm going to actually go ahead and create a new paragraph up here. So I'm going to Control C to copy that. Command V on the, or Command C on the Mac. Control V on the PC, Command V on the Mac to paste. I'm just going to create a new paragraph, call it Cars 1. Very similar to what we had done in the earlier exercises. Again, I'm just creating a location to put these values once I make the changes I make. So you may want to go ahead and do that. Great time to pause and type that in. And then what I want to do is I actually want to replace a value inside my array. So I'm going to come down below the code I put in a couple blank lines. And I'm actually starting to put comments in these so that obviously you'll have access to the exercise files. You'll know what we were doing with this particular exercise if you're just looking at the file and not listening to the video. So in this one, we're replacing a value in the array, and we're actually going to replace index value 0. And since we know that arrays are 0-based indexes, we know that array index place 0 is forward. So when I actually execute this code and reprint this array string, or the array inside my document, inside my browser window, forward should be replaced with Chevy. So let's go ahead and save all those changes. Great time to pause if you want to type it in. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser window, and you'll notice now we've replaced, because I went to cars index 0, I've replaced forward with Chevy in my command, and you can actually see it reflected here inside that new paragraph that we printed out. The length property provides an easy way to append a new element to an array. In other words, if I wanted to actually put something at the end of an array, I could actually do that using the length property. We actually looked at the length property in part 1 of the series. So let's create another new paragraph. I'm going to come in here and copy this. Go up under the last one I created. Put in a new one. This one's going to be Cars 2. I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. Great time to pause if you want to type that in. And again, this time I'm going to add a value to the end of my array. So I'm going to go and grab the code from my exercise file, come down a couple lines and put it in place. And this time you'll notice I've actually put our node in. And I said adds a value to the end of the array. So I've got cars, and then in square brackets, cars.length equal forward. So I'm taking forward now and moving it to the end of the array. Remember, on the last demonstration, we actually removed forward from our array because we replaced it with Chevy. And now I'm going to say document.getElementById cars2.innerHTML cars. So I'm going to redisplay the array once we make this change right below the one we just created. So I'm going to save those changes. Great time to pause if you need to type it in. Refresh my browser window, and now you'll notice we've taken forward and added it back to the end because we've actually done the cars and then cars.length equal forward. So go to the end of the array and append that value on the end. And the next method we're going to look at is splicing an array. The splice method can be used to add new items to an array. And this one's got a few more parameters that are involved with it. Actually gets a little tricky, so we got to go through this one a little slower. The first parameter in the splice method defines the position where the new element should be added or spliced into the existing array. The second parameter defines how many elements should be removed. And then the rest of the parameters define the new elements to be added. And this will make a lot more sense once you see it, but I'm just going over it real quick. And I actually have notes based on what we're doing that are actually going to be part of the file. I'm going to go ahead and add a new paragraph so we have a way to display this. I'm going to come right below the last one. This one's going to be Cars 3 paragraph by ID. Then I'm going to come right down below where we did our last code. Let's put in a couple lines. And let's go ahead and paste these in place. And I've actually gotten 4 lines of notes here because I want you to really understand what's going on with this one. This one I actually tend to use a lot with if I'm using some server-side scripting language to actually modify arrays. Because what I'm doing here is I'm actually splicing into an existing array. So as we talked about in the discussion, so I'm doing cars.splice, and then this first element, or the first parameter, is where the element should be added. And this is the index number. So I'm saying, take the cars array and splice into index value 2. And then this second parameter is how many items should be removed from the existing array. And in this particular example, I'm saying don't remove any, 0. I'm not removing anything. But what I am doing at index value 2, I'm adding 2 new items, Kia and Honda. And then again, I'm just going out and printing that array so you can actually see how the array is printed and how we've modified it using that splice command. Save all those changes. Great time to pause if you want to type it in. And I'm going to update our browser window. And now you can see that we went to 0. 1 is BMW. And then at 2, we put in Kia and Honda. Those are the 2 values that we wanted to add. And then we picked right up where it left off with Porsche, Volvo, Acura, because you'll notice Porsche comes right after BMW up there. Well, right after we inserted our 2 new values, Porsche comes right back in and we finish it off. On that screen. So that's how we can actually splice into an existing array. Now, there are some numeric sort methods in arrays in JavaScript that we could actually go through. I don't use them that often. I wanted to cover the ones that I use most often. We've already got 3 parts of this tutorial series. I think that's enough. We are going to practice these many, many times as we go through the essential training inside JavaScript. One thing I do want you to make you aware of, if you're into any other programming languages like PHP or Perl or C or C# or even Visual Basic, that many programming languages support arrays with named indexes. They're called associative arrays. Arrays with named indexes are called associative arrays or hashes. JavaScript does not support arrays with named indexes. In JavaScript, arrays always use numbered indexes. So if you use a named index, JavaScript will redefine the array to a standard object. After that, all array methods and properties will produce incorrect results. So I just want you to be aware. There is ways of doing this. There are workarounds in JavaScript to use named indexes. But by default, arrays in JavaScript are always indexed with numbers. And again, we're going to get more into this as we get further along in the tutorials. But if you are looking for part of the arrays tutorials in the beginning or the essential series of JavaScript to talk about associative arrays as you know them in other programming languages are not supported in JavaScript. But we will learn more about that as we move forward. So I hope you enjoyed the 3 tutorials on arrays. Now we're going to move in even deeper into JavaScript and probably get into working with some conditional operators. I think that should be our next step, so that's probably where we'll go from here. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to contact me either through email or through the website. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.